Hello, English97. I'm back with a week 2 video where I hope to give you some advice about the homework and maybe comb through the stories that we're reading today to give you a sense of what to pay attention to, perhaps, if you're struggling with that. First, let's see where the homework is. Remember, I'm going to Pages to find the homework. Here is the homework record, and the explanation is down here. Here we go, week 2 homework. So we're going to be reading and annotating Sunday in the Park, and Beauty, When the Other Dancer is the Self. There's going to be some discussions to contribute to. You're going to be adding some big questions about these stories using those links right there, and submitting an annotation and a summary, and adding a couple of vocabulary words to the list that we're coming up with. So why don't we, oh, and thank you to those who have emailed me saying that the assignments were not up. It's true that the annotation submission and the summary submission were not up, but now if you go to assignments, I have checked all the boxes and there it is. Sunday in the Park, Beauty, annotation for week 2 text, summary of week 2 text. Should all be there. If there's still a problem, do email me like you did. That really helps us all out. Why don't we look at Beauty, When the Other Dancer is the Self. I'm not going to review it in detail, but I would like to get you started with some of the thoughts that I have, or maybe some of the passages that I think you could pay attention to if you want some ideas. One thing to know about this short story by Alice Walker is that she jumps around in time a lot. I think we've already seen that in Chocolate. There were time jumps there when it went from the affair they were having to her past and her education and all that. Same thing's going on in this short story. Sometimes she's talking about when she's a little girl, and then she'll jump to when she's an adult, and she'll go back to when she was younger. So it may be helpful to kind of list out chronologically when things happen for you. Here are some of the notes that I paid attention, or that I wrote in my annotation. I noticed that in the beginning, there's a lot of competition between the children about who the dad likes the most, or who will go with the dad to the fair. So already we have this kind of competition between siblings, almost kind of like a ranking system of children, maybe. I'm the prettiest, so we see how confident she is in the beginning, and she has this assertiveness, which you will notice she loses later on. She has pride in the beginning. She's not at all confused about why her dad chose her to go to the fair. If you're wondering, like, why did the dad have to choose, I think it had to do with how much room they had in their car. People loved her sass and her style. Then I started thinking about how the words that children use against each other when we're young can have a lasting influence on us. One of the things this story seems to be about is about lasting trauma from childhood. And then I noticed that around here, page 2, top of page 2, that's when there's a turn in the story. I noticed in your homework, some of you are identifying that in your annotations. You're going, wait, there's something changing in the story. There's a kind of turn. And stories can have more than one turn in them, but this is definitely one, where things were one way and then they become different. And she signals that by saying, but then one day it ended. Okay, they're growing up. We hear about the injury that she sustains, and there's a kind of conspiracy of silence where all the brothers decide we're not going to talk about what really happened so that they can save their own butts. I'm continuing to talk about trauma here. I thought, why did I circle this? Oh, yes. I'm not going to tell you my thoughts about this yet. I want you to kind of struggle with this, but I noticed that a couple of different times, maybe 2 or 3 different times throughout this short story, the writer brings up that she notices she changed after this accident or this injury that she received. And she asks people, did you notice that I changed? And her family are like, no, what are you talking about? I don't know if they're lying. I don't know if they didn't notice. So I wrote, there's an imperceptible change, perceptible to her, but imperceptible to her family. She's becoming a different kind of person. Her parents don't seem to understand. What do I mean? That's the author speaking to us directly. She's saying, okay, you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that I've changed. I'm going to explain it. You'll notice she goes through a lot of changes. School performance, some other changes. I was surprised that her school was a former prison. That's why I wrote school was a prison, double exclamation mark. We start to learn about this defect in her eye and how possibly it might have this ripple effect on her entire personality, how abandoned she felt. She goes through a really tough period in her life. I think this was me trying to work out what's going on with her. How did she start from being like the highest ranked among the children? I don't mean that seriously, but I mean that like she felt like very proud of herself and like daddy likes me the best when she was a little kid. And then something happens to her to send her kind of rolling down this hill of suffering. A whole series of things really happen. And then here again, you did not change, they say. If you're confused about what this is, remember that short stories write things out of order. Like I said in class, short stories operate more like the way our mind operates, where we can live in the moment, but we also live in the past and in the future, and we can like jump. If you pay attention to your thoughts, you'll notice that you kind of jump in time. Short stories do that too. So she's referring back to, no, she says, whether I changed after the accident, no, what do you mean? And then she reminds us of that. You did not change, they say. So throughout the whole story, this is a thread that's running through it of like, I think that I did change, but for some reason my family's not noticing how I changed. You may want to kind of try to wrestle with why that is. And there's no clear answer, by the way. She doesn't come out and tell us what the answer is. That's interpretation is necessary. Again, now she's even thinking like, am I making this up? Was I always the way I am now, or what happened? She's starting to hide from her family, kind of depressed or ashamed, and so on. I'm going to skip through some of this. You can pause if you want to see the notes that I wrote. And I think you should try to focus some of your discussions on what really healed her. It's not as simple as it may seem on the surface, because at one point she thinks, okay, now I'm better. Now I've had surgery, my eye is fixed, everything's okay. But then no, it's not really resolved. And what really does resolve this shame that she's feeling? That's some of my opening thoughts about that story. And we have another short story. I promise we don't only read short stories in this class, but that's just what we're starting with. Sunday in the Park. I'm going to go a little more quickly about this. Here are some highlights that I made on passages that I found interesting. I think you should pay attention to all the details about what kind of person the family is, especially Morton, the husband. If you don't really read closely, or if you don't read more than once, you could miss how well he's described and how the description of him suggests something about what kind of person or what kind of man he is. And that might help you understand perhaps what the author's going for. So we learn simply from the magazine that he's reading what kind of man he is. We learn about how he looks, city pale, cooped up all week. Well, reminds me of me, really. Then we learn this kid is described in a way that kind of sets him apart from their child, from the narrator's child. I noticed this quote about public sandbox. Like maybe this will spark some ideas with you about the theme of what is public and what are we allowed to do in public versus private. Then we have this confrontation between the two men, Morton and this other guy, I forgot who it was. The way they interact is like night and day. They're not the same type of man at all. This was an interesting passage. She noticed the muscle in Morton's jaw tighten. He was rarely angry, blah, blah, blah. She was suffused with a tenderness for her husband and an impotent rage. So now we're seeing a character development inside her. She's feeling something different than she was at the beginning. And then notice this, how dreadful, how incredible. She must do something, stop them, call for help. This is how she feels at this moment, that violence is bad, that they should not butt heads. They should not fight or have an argument. I think she changes her mind, or seems to start changing her mind towards the end, but I'm not sure about that. I wonder what you'll think about that. This is an interesting passage you may want to write about. Her first feeling was one of relief that the fight had been avoided, that no one was hurt, that beneath it there was a layer of something else, something heavy and inescapable. She sensed that it was more than just an unpleasant incident, more than defeat of reason by force. So if you think that the story is simply about there were two people and one used the threat of violence and the other one didn't, and you think that's what the story is all about, you might be missing something, because even the character in the story is saying there is something more than just violence wins out over reason. Something else is bothering her. And I'm going to come right out and tell you, this story does not tell you what her feeling is. It doesn't come out and tell you. It wants you to kind of work through it and decide for yourself. Yeah, she says it had something to do with her and Morton. So what is bothering her is not just about that fight. It's about their relationship in a weird way. So we can talk on Tuesday about what that is, and I hope you talk about it also in your homework. And let's see. And then we have this at the end. She's saying, stop crying to her child. I am ashamed of you. So she went from, I hope people don't fight, I hope everyone is really reasonable, to like, I am ashamed of my little kid. Why? That's kind of an interesting ending. This whole ending is full of so many interesting unspoken but hinted at emotions and reactions. So there's a lot in here to dig into, and you could write an essay about violence, about relationships, about reason, about negotiation, about conflict resolution, about public places versus, there's so many possible questions we could ask about this. And if we go looking in the homework, let me go back to pages, homework record, we can see some of the homework people have already done for it. So let's see. Oh, here we go. Big question with Sunday in the Park. There we go. What have people said so far? Alana said, what is the wife's name in the story of Sunday in the Park? That might be a little too, it's too, what's the word? Either the answer is in the story, in which case it's too obvious, or the answer is not in the story, in which case there's no way for us to know. So for big questions, I want something more related to the meaning of the story, not simply like, what is someone's name? But you were courageous enough to be one of the first person to do your homework, so thanks for that, Alana. Why does the story end so abruptly? That could work. Were there underlying problems between Morton and his wife? Her mouth tightened in resentment. So there are some clues that maybe there might be some problems in their marriage. Okay, I could see that working. She's totally fine with whatever, right or wrong, disengaging. I'm not sure. I think there's a typo here. It makes it hard for me to understand what that means. How can he discipline his child when he could not even stand for his family? That's an interesting, stand up for his family, right? That's an interesting question. Maybe that's what was bothering the narrator. Why does the father sound like he wants to punish Larry at the end of the story? Yeah, even the narrator, the woman, she seemed like she kind of wanted to punish. I might be wrong about that. She seemed like she wanted to punish someone. I don't remember exactly who she was targeting, like maybe her husband. He wants to punish the child. She wants to punish him for that, but she also is ashamed of her child. So there's like, they're all kind of turning against each other in that moment. Why does the father sound like he wants to punish? Oh, does a person's educational background dictate if they would become violent in the future? Oh, that's interesting. And the question is, are there clues in the story about that? I think maybe, because we learn a little bit about what the father's background is. He's a professor. He reads the New York Times. And then maybe there are clues about what the other father is like. So I could see this being a good big question. So far, so good. Yeah, that I think is where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you on Tuesday. Goodbye.